Okay, it looks like I have top of the hour, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to our guest presentation, Training Communication Partners by Simplifying the Task of Modeling. Thank you for joining us this evening. Saltillo is honored to have Gretchen Storm, a speech-language pathologist from Colorado, presenting today. My name is Lisa Tim, and I will be your facilitator tonight. A little housekeeping to get us started. Everyone is muted for the presentation to eliminate feedback and distractions. You will see a materials section in which you can download the handout for today, as well as your ASHA documents. You will also receive these handouts in a follow-up email. We will answer questions towards the end of the presentation. You can chat your questions in at any time on the lower panel of your toolbar. If we are unable to get to all the questions during the time we have, we will compile them and send a follow-up email with the answers that we come up with. This course is approved for 1 hour of ASHA credit. Your attendance is timestamped through the GoToTraining site. You must be online the entire hour in order to receive ASHA credit. Please follow the directions provided in the materials section to submit your ASHA participation form. And now, without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Gretchen Storm. Thank you.
Welcome, everybody. So today's topic, training communication partners by simplifying the task of modeling. So currently, I work in Littleton Public Schools in Colorado. I specifically work in a center-based classroom. I am the speech-language pathologist who services a caseload of students who are primarily nonverbal, and some of them are also partially verbal, however have significant verbal needs. I also am the owner of a private practice in the Denver metro area, and we specialize in AAC in-home therapy. As part of my school team, we do have a paraprofessional team as well. We have a team of 9 here at my school, as well as 2 special ed teachers who I work with, certified occupational therapists, and many, many, many teachers and other service providers. I believe a lot of what you will see today has come from my dual perspectives, both in the schools and as a private provider in home, and really thinking about how can we train paraprofessionals, teachers, special ed teachers, parents, other providers in home to use AAC across environments. My disclosures, my financial disclosures are that I am going to mention a Teachers Pay Teachers website, and I am also going to mention a book that I have written. It's called Bruce and His Talker. My non-financial disclosures are that I'm a member of ASHA, and I am volunteering today to be part of Saltillo Corporation's guest webinars. So my primary goal for you all today is to leave hopefully with an understanding of where to start when trying to train others, and maybe even train yourself to use a communication device. In order to do that, you will need to identify a vocabulary that is set up for language learning. Identify helpful features in the communication device which support others in learning it. Understand the task of modeling, which is also known as aided language stimulation. Utilize tools to create materials to help others learn to use the communication device, and write clear and concise directions to teach others. So I'm sure many or all of us are very aware of current barriers for teaching others. There's never enough time in the day, and there's definitely never enough time to train as much as we'd like to. Technology and all of the challenges that come with it can be daunting and also very time consuming. There is a steep learning curve that occurs when learning a new communication vocabulary or system. Even myself, who has a lot of practice on a variety of different communication devices, does struggle with a brand new system or even a slightly different vocabulary in a system I'm very familiar with. And there is a learning curve, even for me, from one student or client to another. There is limited information on how to be an effective and efficient trainer. There's lack of reimbursement for time spent training. Everybody wants us to reimburse for direct time when really we need this information out because we spend so little time with a lot of these individuals using AAC. And then we are often training people with a variety of skill sets and comfort levels with both technology and AAC. So what are the keys to success, in my opinion? Attitude, thoughtful AAC selection, when possible and appropriate, and I'll talk more about that in a bit. Conscious vocabulary choice, the use of modeling and aided language stimulation, aided language stimulation to teach the user, engaging activities which are customized, and errorless learning supports. The key here is to make this process as friendly, as user-friendly, and as easy as possible, because we want this communication device to get used across the day. What I've found is one of the most difficult steps to starting to use a communication device is literally picking up the communication device and starting to touch buttons on it and starting to use it. Once that barrier is broken down, it seems that people start to ask questions and they start to understand how it can be used with verbal language, how it can be used to model. But this is really our first step and focus. So attitude. Many of us are coming in with more knowledge about AAC than the people we're trying to train. We must empower others to learn. We need to let them know that we're learning with them. We are not ever going to be the experts on AAC for a specific individual. I learn something new from every single student, client, individual I work with. So we need to create an environment where it's okay for those learning to ask questions. We want to work collaboratively. Even, like I said, if you're coming in as an expert, it's really important that you meet the team where they are. Try to compliment them on what has already been attempted and tried, and then use it to build confidence for continued support and learning. A little bit of validation or a compliment just to start off goes a long ways, and it's definitely not going to hurt anybody. And then remain open to those who know the AAC user best. If they have suggestions, try to honor those suggestions in any way possible. And this might be a situation where you've been working with an individual for an hour, twice a week for an entire year, and a parent comes in and they have a recommendation on what needs to be targeted on the communication device next, based on a variety of observations or based on their immediate needs. And it's just really important to remember that you're really only with them those few hours during the week, and the rest of the week, everybody else is still trying to communicate with this user. Conscious vocabulary choice. And when I'm talking about vocabulary in this slide, I'm actually talking about the vocabulary that we use as professionals, or maybe even as parents who are very familiar with AAC. So, for example, a very frequent term used in the world of AAC is aided language stimulation. Now, if I were to talk to a classroom teacher and ask them to use aided language stimulation, they would probably look at me very confused. We don't want to assume that anybody knows what this type of very professional vocabulary means. So if and when possible, we want to use these ideas I have here on the right. For example, modeling is a little bit more descriptive of what we're doing than aided language stimulation. I think you can still use both, but you want to use these other terms occasionally and intersperse them with your language. Define it. Using the communication device yourself to talk to the AAC user. Okay, now somebody knows what I'm really talking about here. And then you can even talk about what the purpose of aided language stimulation is. Oh, we're teaching symbol meaning in the communication device. And we're doing it by showing them where the buttons are by using it ourselves. The same thing goes for core vocabulary. Core vocabulary and high frequency words, your dolch words, your fry words, many of them are overlapping. So especially in the schools, if we refer to core vocabulary as those high frequency words and then go a little bit further to define it, we talk about verbs, adjectives, prepositions, pronouns, interjections, question words, and adverbs. Really, the one thing we don't talk about is using nouns. And the reason behind this is that really these other vocabulary words are going to be much more usable in a variety of environments than your very specific narrow nouns that can be used only in specific activities. So these are just things to keep in mind when you are training paraprofessionals, parents, teachers, and peers. I'm going to talk a lot about peer training as well today, because one of the things we do here at my elementary school is we work with the students to become peer models on the communication devices. Now we go into thoughtful AAC selection. This is also very important. So in order to address the core vocabulary words that we were just talking about in the core vocabulary, we really need a communication device with a vocabulary that can do just that. So these are just things to consider. I know this is not something that can always be considered. Individuals have a variety of different needs, but whenever possible, consider these things. Do they have a free software where you can write with icons or capture button sequences? And I'm thinking about for making materials. Do they provide a free version for the SLP or the parent to use that mirrors the child's device? Are there other training websites that have materials that go with the device? Is there a resource sharing website? Some communication devices have a full website where you can actually download activities and vocabulary pages that other people have made. So these are all things to consider. And of course, and some devices may be appropriate for a child but don't have these resources, you're going to just have to get a little bit more creative with your materials. But that doesn't mean it's not the device for that individual. Okay, a little bit more on vocabulary. So this is an example, I just pulled this offline of a highly customized vocabulary. So on it you see, you've got basic needs, art activities, playhouse, time to cook, school, nursery rhymes, let's play, where's spot, birthday, Simon says, actions, and custom activity. I mean, this vocabulary sounds like a lot of fun until the device comes to you as a new teacher, para or SLP, and you're in science class, and you're expected to sort rocks. You're going to sort them by size and touch. So, where in this communication vocabulary would you find something that you could comment or model during this rock sorting activity? Where would you go if you can't find a word? Okay, so that was a little bit tricky, right? This is pretty specific, so expanding to new environments would probably be a pretty big challenge here. So let's look at this vocabulary. We're going to try this again. So we're sorting rocks, and you want to have the individual participate in this rock sorting activity. Okay, well, up here at the top, you've already seen there's a describe button. You're guessing, well, there's probably some nice descriptive vocabulary in there we could use. We could also use some stuff on this main page just to talk about what we're doing. Are we putting these rocks in piles? Then we could say put in with these two buttons on the main page here, put in. Or maybe we're identifying which types of rocks we like. So it might be, I like that. And then you could even do, no like that, for the ones that they don't think, maybe they're not as pretty. So this is the difference between a highly customized vocabulary and a very core-based vocabulary. Just something to think about. Okay, the magic words of just use it. How many people have left a communication device with a para or a teacher and just said, just make sure the device is out and you're using it all day? And then this may be the district AT person and they don't have time to stay, but make sure you use it all day. See you later. Or how many of you have been the receiver of a communication device and the SLP or AT person says, I'll be back in a week and just make sure you use it every day. And maybe they're not even telling the SLP, maybe this is the information for the paraprofessional or for the teacher. So this is where we have to start talking about modeling. What is modeling? This is the definition from Drager in 2009. It's a big one, so I made some takeaway bullets here at the bottom. The takeaways are, the goal of modeling is to enhance input. We want the communication partner to use AAC with verbal speech to provide a model. What is modeled should be similar to the expected output of what we want the user to generate on the communication device. Modeling can also increase comprehension by providing visual information. Well, I've heard a lot, how well do I need to model? Well, you need to model well enough to provide normal language learning opportunities for those with complex developmental communication needs so that each AAC user acquires personal maximum language competence. So what I take out of that is we need to model well enough so that our lack of being able to use the communication device is not the reason that they are not progressing in language skills. So again, here's what we know about modeling. It's important. It needs to be done regularly. It's similar to learning verbal language. It needs to be done at or slightly above the user's level of language use. It should incorporate everyday activities in a variety of environments. It needs to include core vocabulary words as much as possible. Okay, so this is really a lot. So this person dropped off this communication device and said, please use it. And then we now know these are all the things that we're supposed to be doing with this communication device. So this brings us to the next point and why we're here today. Why do we need to train? Speech language pathologists cannot do this alone. This is a huge task. And we're really not with the AAC user all day. We have snippets of time where we're working on very, very specific skills for language learning. We really need buy-in from others working with the AAC device in order to get carryover to all those other environments. It's really important to have a variation in language models. For example, when a baby is first learning language, there are several different people talking to that baby. They're hearing language in all different forms. Everybody uses language in a slightly unique way. And I think that's really important for individuals who use AAC to see as well. We don't just want them always having just one person who is their language model. We need parent and caregiver buy-in, and we need them to be the long-term advocate because truly they're going to be with the individual who uses AAC for a prolonged amount of time and will likely be their best advocate. With trained partners, there's faster acquisition of AAC device use from the user. So that means they're going to learn it faster, they're going to be meeting their goals faster, and they're going to acquire language faster. And that is our ultimate goal for functional communication overall. So modeling, important. Yes, we need to definitely train because we can't do it alone. So I found this wonderful chart off mycoughdrop.com. It should be in your handouts as well. I'm not going to read through the whole thing. I really just wanted to point out number 2. The key there is know the device. It's pretty tough to model something you don't understand or know. Take some time to get to know the student's AAC so you can model with meaning. So here we go. It's time to start training. We do need to consider that you can't model if you don't know the device. We want to encourage everyone to use a function such as word finder or word search if that's a function on the communication device. And what that is, for those of you who haven't used a communication device with these options, is you can type in the word you're looking for, and on the communication device, a box will pop up and it will show you how, from the home page, how to get to the device you're looking, or I'm sorry, the button or icon you're looking for. So it really takes away a lot of time from people searching in and out of folders and not being able to find things that relate to an activity, and then the activity moves on in class and the person trying to model is still looking for this one word they really want to find. And maybe it's not even in there. At least with word finder or word search, you type it in, it doesn't show up, you know, well, that word's not in here. We should probably figure out a way to describe that word using some core vocabulary, or maybe it's something we need to add. We want to consider teaching paras, parents, teachers, and peers through shared reading and structured errorless activities. And I'll go through these more in a bit. And it doesn't matter the symbol set, but we do have to specifically teach the icon location in the device. So even if an individual knows what, what cold is, we still need to teach them where cold is in the communication device. They're not naturally going to know, oh, it's this pink button that has this rainbow on it, or this man pointing to objects, and then I'm going to find it and it's going to be this symbol that kind of maybe looks like a drink, or maybe it looks like somebody out in the snow. So we do have to specifically teach where those are, and that's why modeling is truly so important. So this all sounds great, but I don't have time to learn this, nor do I have time to teach others how to do this. So here's the plan, or at least this is the plan that I came up with at my school and as a private provider that has worked extremely well. First of all, I'm using free resources to customize and create engaging activities. I'm not going to go into how to download these today. I'm not going to talk about how exactly to use these resources today. There is a webinar on Saltillo's website on how to use the chat editor. You can also find a nice informational guide on the print-ROM on the PRC website on how to download and use the PASS software. But both of these are softwares that are downloadable on, and I put it in your handouts, on Windows-only computers. These don't work on Macs. And they have been used to create all of the materials that I'm going to share in the upcoming slides. The one other tool that many people don't know about that is just amazing is the snipping tool from Microsoft. So if you search in your start window, you can search snipping tool. This tool, once I usually attach it to my taskbar, this tool can snip any pictures or anything off your screen, and I often use it to snip Google Images for the books I'm using. We want to keep in mind when we're looking at materials and when we're using materials and creating them that vocabulary development needs to include a wide variety of communicative functions. Requesting is often the one we jump to with AAC, which is great. It's definitely one that individuals are motivated by and they need to learn, but we also need to remember rejecting is also very powerful. Initiating with others, commenting, and directing. Directing can also, giving them the power to direct an activity or direct you around can actually be very motivating as well. So errorless learning supports. What is this? These are an easy and successful way to learn communication device vocabularies. They're supports which provide pathways to get to specific icons. So back when I was talking about Word Finder, I was talking about how if you type in a word, you can search it and it will show you from the home page how to get to that button. Once downloaded onto your computer, the chat editor and past softwares can provide you those sequences. So I can type in the pathway to a certain button, and all somebody has to do is match what I have to the device, and they will find the exact button or phrase that they're looking for. And they provide structure to learning the communication device. For example, I often hear, let's say, how do I find blank? I have social communication information and I want a paraprofessional to use the social page during a given time during the day. I will go into chat editor and print out the pathway. So I would push on this specific individual's device, social, and then personal. And then once I push personal, the whole page shows up of all about that student. And now the paraprofessional doesn't have to think about how to get there. They can just worry about using the page once they're there. The example below that is in emails. I like to inform parents when I've added new things into the communication device, and it's not so helpful to tell a parent, hey, I added classmates to the communication device when there's hundreds and hundreds of pages in there. Instead, I'll say, I added classmates, follow this path from the home page to find where I added them. And then I will include people and then school people in the email. The parents can open up the email, look at the communication device, go, oh, okay, find people on the first page, look for school people on the second page, and there are all the classmates. So it really simplifies it. So I think I explained this a little bit already. But for both of these editors, you can upload a communication device user's specific vocabulary. So for chat editor, if they use a NovaChat device or if they use TouchChat, you can get their identical vocabulary into this program. And for the past software, if they are using LAMP or they're using a PRC device, you can get in here. Also on chat editor, a lot of people don't know, but you can actually get LAMP on the chat editor if you search under vocabularies as well. These were originally created as editing softwares, so you can edit the device and then send the vocabulary back. But for the purpose of today, what I've used them for is for creating visual supports using the symbols from the individual's communication devices. Down below, and this is in your handouts, the capture feature, that bar at the bottom is how I'm doing it. You have to use the capture feature in order to get the symbols out of this program. And for the past software, you use the icon, write with icons feature to get the symbols, and then you can copy and paste those out of the program. So let's start with some examples of some of the fun creative activities I've made to engage people who are learning to model with the individual and the communication device. So what I've done, this one is specifically for the Simply 20 word power vocabulary. I've put symbols into books, and this is the exact pathway. So on this individual's communication device, you would select people, and then there would be the option to select he, is, and then you would need to hit the more arrow, and hurting would be an option. So he is hurting. without having to think about how to navigate to those places. On the next one, he is soft. If we think back to that slide where I was talking about communicative functions, you can see this book is a commenting book. It's not, I want blank, I want blank, but you can do all kinds of different targets. You just want to remember whatever you're putting in this book is what the person modeling and who's reading the book over and over again with the communication device user, this is the vocab they're going to learn and remember. So next time somebody gets hurt in class, I mean, that's something that happens fairly frequently. I hope, and usually what I see is if they've read a book like this where hurting was one of the words, they remember where it is, they'll pick up the device and go, oh yeah, that's in your talker. Look, he is hurting. So another way to use visuals in books like these are to put these books into a binder, and I specifically do this at the beginning of the year, or what I send a binder home with parents who are new to implementing AAC at home or modeling AAC at home. And I'll put this binder together and say, hey, can you use the communication device yourself to read one of these books a night, or for the paraprofessionals, I say one of these books a day, to the person who's learning to use the AAC device. Oops, one more thing. I do also use these for peers. I'll put a binder in the classroom and set up a list of peers, and they can check themselves off and set up a good time of day with the teacher and say, okay, we'll go through this list. Each day a different peer is going to come over. They're going to pull out this binder. They can pick which book they want to read. And the peer and the student are going to use the communication device together to read the book and comment on these images. So I do try to make the images somewhat entertaining if possible. Fun for everyone. Here's an example of an adjectives book that I created. These are all just Google images. I used the snipping tool to snip them out. And I did more writing on the top for this. For example, this one says big bike, and then on the bottom it just says big. This is teaching that we can say more. We can say a word and model maybe just one word and then say a two-word phrase, and that's okay. Here's another example. Again, all just Google images. These are descriptive vocabulary, and I targeted the preposition on. So I wanted to make sure that the person modeling would learn the word on and start modeling that more in class, and then really start to use the describing page. And for this book, funny made sense with the images, so we targeted funny. So we've got funny hat on, funny glasses on, funny eyes on. You see, I do try to make them somewhat repetitive, so the individual using AAC is seeing the pattern of how to get to specific buttons over and over again. It's being modeled several times within each book. Here's another example. This was an attempt to teach pronoun plus verbs, and the class was working on pronouns, and I really just wanted he and she. And I figured, well, why not also throw an action in there? We'll model too, and hopefully we pick up some actions, and then he and she is repetitive on every other page. Here's another way to do it, and this is an example where I used the past software. The other ones were Chat Editor. It, again, depends on what communication system the individual you are working with is using. So what I was saying about Froggy Gets Dressed is that this just has one page. So really, you don't have to create an icon sequence for every single page, but they are modeling frog, what did you forget? And I forgot my blank on every page. What was amazing with this specific book is that I saw a teacher pick this book up and read it with these two phrases one week, and the following week the student forgot to put their planner in their backpack. The teacher walks over to the communication device unprompted and says the word forget on it, because she knew that she was confident she could go over to that communication device. She knew the word forget was in there because she had been using it with this book, and she modeled it on her own. So that's the power that some of these really simple, basic icon sequence books can have. There we go. All right. So I'll be talking a little bit more about my website in a bit, but I've created core phrases for some communication device vocabularies. And what I do is I cut all these phrases up and then I keep them in a Ziploc bag, and I can pull them out during any activity. And I can put them in the classroom and say, hey, if you're not really sure what to do on the communication device, try pulling out one or two of these phrases that make sense with what you're doing and just use those. So where do I go from here? Well, we want to move into more activities which include icons for the device, so the exact symbols, but that don't always include the exact pathways, because we can't just have the individuals matching all the time. And we want them to start to expand language as well. So here are some of the things I'm going to include. I'm going to show you sentence strips to target repetitive phrase books, phrase boards, the use of symbols in back and forth sheets, question boards with icon sequences, games and activities with specific phrases, core boards, and shared reading. So here's an example of a book where I created a repetitive phrase strip. It's pretty self-explanatory. I really tried to target the core words were the repetitive phrase, so come with me, and then they were changing out the noun. Here's another example of a book I modified. I used the symbols from Chat Editor. Here we can manipulate I can read serial box, I can read slow, stop. The nice thing about having these where you can manipulate them is that maybe the individual is really only practicing finding the word I, or maybe finding the verb. So I'll model I can, and then I'll have them fill in read, and we can take turns putting those on as we model. Here's another example of a questions book. I really wanted to target not just commenting, but also target asking questions. All of these are available on my website, which is listed in your resources at the end, and much of what I'm showing you is downloadable for free. So I really wanted to start working on more descriptive vocabulary, and have found science can be a really fun outlet for that. And if the activity is simple and again has the icon sequences or the phrases that I want people working on, once somebody who is modeling gets pretty familiar with the communication device, you can start to fade out the visual prompts for the person who is modeling, and maybe just start including things you'd like to make sure they target during a specific activity. For example, here I've got blow up, put on, I do, you do. I'm just giving ideas so that it takes the thinking out of it, and they really just get to work on the language portion and really truly engaging the AAC user in this activity. So once the user is easily matching the icon pictures, you can also use fill in the blanks with maybe a word bank to get them to start to expand and make more choices about what they're saying. Here's an example of a phrase board. So I had a paraprofessional come up to me and say, hey, I'm getting really good at using single words to talk about what's going on in the classroom, but I'm not really sure what to do about putting more than one word together. I thought, okay, how can we simplify this? Because if we can simplify it and really get somebody to understand the task, that's when they start to feel comfortable and confident, and they start to expand on their own in their modeling. So I decided to provide a set of phrases that could be applicable to lots of different things in class. And I said, okay, when you don't know what to do and you know you want to be combining words, pick one or two of these words, put them on the back. I put a Velcro strip on the back and just work on those two phrases during that activity. Here's an example of a back and forth communication sheet with symbols. And this was really to start getting parents to engage more with symbols at home. And again, remember, people don't naturally know, for example, that this boiling pot means hot and not cook, or stove, or steam. So it is important to verbally teach and model on the communication device the location of all of these icons so that our AAC users are getting familiar. So one of our second grade classes has game day for a half hour on Fridays. And I went in there and observed, and I noticed our kids who use communication devices were getting the role of either being the person to pass out the cards or being the person to push the button of a game. Rarely were they being engaged in the language portion of the game itself. So I started to include games with these icon sequences, which the peers were already familiar with because they were reading these books, so they knew that this was the path of how to get there on the communication device. So I threw these icon sequences in with this game, and I didn't do any teaching in this example. I didn't have time to teach that day. I threw the game in there, and the next time I walked in, the peers had all the icon sequences out, and they were naturally giving choices to the person who uses the communication device and then helping try to find these different categories. It was amazing. It's all about the simplicity of this. Here's an example of my giant classroom core board. I do have smaller ones. This just happens to be one for an individual who has a vision impairment. However, having symbols available on the walls around is very, very useful. And I will show you. That's me. I'm reading the book, Come Out and Play, Little Mouse. And I have off this core board, oops, I'm sorry. Off the core board I just showed you, I have pulled, I cannot, and the phrase below that is come out to play. So there's a cat and a mouse and they're having this conversation. You should definitely check out this book if you haven't read it before. It's great for core vocabulary, but I will assign one student to be the cat and one student to be the mouse. I didn't have to create any specific icon sequences for this because we've moved beyond that to just really having the end symbols, so the last symbols on these sentence strips. And then the students participate by commenting. One says, will you come out and play, or come out and play? And the other one says, I cannot today. And then I'll read the words in between. Here is another example of me reading the book from head to toe. From that core board, I created the strip, Can You Do It? And then had my little friend here ask the question, can you do it? And then I would respond and I would do the action. I do believe we missed a slide here. Here we go. Here is an example of a game that I absolutely love. Hopefully many of you are familiar with this game. It's called Cariboo. It is the older version. It can be purchased off Amazon. And what I've done is I've modified it using the lessonpicks.com website, and I have changed out the cards, so they're all verb cards. I decided to use the same color coding as the verbs in the communication device are green, and the verbs here also have a green background. And then I just pulled off the core board. I wanted to work on pronouns. I said, okay, we're working on he and she. I'm going to throw is in there, and then we'll have to find these verbs in your communication device. And I think that's also okay to go to the word finder and have the individual help you find the word. It's it's an important skill for them to be able to start really using letters to create words, because ultimately, if we can spell, then we can spell anything, and language is unlimited. So, one other thing that I do at the beginning of the school year that has been just hugely successful is I set up the classes for success. So this is before I put the binders in with the icon sequences. This is before I'm trying to get them to play games with kids using communication devices. Often at the beginning of the year, there are many, many questions from students about communication devices. And so what I did is I created a book, and it will be available on my website probably within the next 2 days for purchase. But this book is called Bruce and His Talker. And it proceeds to talk about what Bruce is like as an individual, and then how he struggles with communication. A speech language pathologist brings him a communication device one day, and it's very exciting, but he realizes that he doesn't know how to use it. And how is he going to learn to use it to say all the things he wants to say? So then I proceed to, in this book, demonstrate examples of ways to model. So for example, this page on the bottom left corner, Bruce's friend Jane helps him learn his talker by talking to him on it during science class. She uses the talker to say the words, yikes, big mess, and come help. So I am starting to normalize that it's okay for peers to use a communication device with the user in class to communicate back and forth. In the end, Bruce loves his new talker, but it is a lot of hard work to learn to say everything he wants to say. He still gets frustrated sometimes. Luckily, Bruce has some really great friends, teachers, and family members who are there to help teach him and give him reminders anytime he needs. So, empowering peers and teachers to be part of the learning and modeling process at the very beginning is really important to have success when you're talking about using all of these materials. A couple other tips for setting up classrooms to be successful: set up times and activities in a daily schedule. Make symbol access available to students on their schedules, recall sheets, on the walls, on their desks, wherever possible. Check your with your literacy coach if you have one of those and you happen to be in a school for leveled books that are repetitive. Those ones are the easiest ones to start with because you only have to create one sentence strip for that whole book, and then often can do like a fill in the blank at the end. Create a loan library. A lot of those books I have in binders, and I'm ready to share those out whenever people need them or parents need them or want to use them. Paras, have them read to students using the device whenever possible. Homework, what I've done is I've used a shared Google Drive, and into there I drag these pathway books, these books with exact pathways to that student's communication device, or vice versa. As the private speech therapist, I will create a Google Drive and put all these books in and ask the school team to print them out and read them aloud using the communication device at school. And then peer reading buddies I've talked about a lot already. So a couple more carryover strategies. I'm going to give an example of home practice and a social story. So here's an example of a home practice sheet I have created using Chat Editor and the symbols, and these are the exact pathways. You can read through it. It's in your handouts as well, but I just want to go to the I dance one. So I give parents very specific instructions. Model dancing. You could even use music to make it fun. Use the communication device to say, I dance every time you dance. Have your child try it. So again, errorless because the parent knows where dance is because you just showed them using that sequence. Here's an example of a social story. I had a client I was working with who was laughing every time someone got hurt. And what the teacher was doing is having her go over and say she was sorry. And I thought, oh my gosh, I think we really need to provide her language so that she can talk about what she's seeing and maybe feeling. So I created the social story and I used the exact pathways to some customized vocabulary and phrases I added in. I can ask, are you okay? I can ask, can I help you? I can ask, are you hurt? And anybody reading this could then figure out from the homepage how to get to these phrases for her to immediately use. I have the materials, but how do I get everyone to use them? Well, I think the key is writing great directions. So don't assume that anyone can look at an activity or communication device and know what exactly you want them to do, even if it's really clear in your head and you feel like you've explained it really well. You want to be concrete. You want to be specific. Take a picture and give a visual. I mean, all of us adults also benefit from visuals. Use language the person modeling can understand. That goes back to using words such as modeling instead of aided language stimulation, using high frequency words instead of the word core vocabulary. Here's just a very simple example. I put a binder together and the directions are have a friend or teacher read these books with Alex using his talker. I found that if I didn't put those directions on this book, Alex was required to read the book to himself using his talker, but I wanted to work on modeling, so I had to put that specific instruction in there. Here's another example of specific instructions. Pick one of the photos. So I provided an activity with lots of verb photos. Put the blue strip in front of the student and show them the photo. See at the bottom, you can see the blue strip. It's very easy to follow. Decide, is it a he or a she? Put is on the blue sentence strip, and then give a choice of 3 pictures and have the student pick which one goes with the photo. The nice thing is, using Chat Editor, I could get these symbols exactly from their device into these directions in a matter of minutes. So finally, use the talker to read the sentence aloud. Pick a new photo and start all over. Here's another example of concrete instructions for carryover. And this is where I took a second to teach as well. So I said at the end of this book, remember, all actions are green. We can't assume that people know this. Also, you can search for actions by the first letter of the action under actions, arrow over, and then actions A to Z in this specific communication vocabulary. And then I gave some ideas. First of all, I gave some ideas below of how to get to the words I wanted them to work on. And then I said, do an action and try to find the action on the talker. Watch a peer do an action and then talk about what the peer just did. Have the student tell you what action to do. I've also developed question boards for carryover that have icon sequences. I'm going to show you what this looks like. For morning questions and morning question routines. Again, this is another example of Errorless, but it is something that required almost no teaching on my part. I think I showed it to the paraprofessional once and said, can you make sure one peer comes over each morning and they use the communication device to talk about these questions and answers? And a couple weeks later, I walked in and it was fully running itself. Of course, you need the teacher's buy-in, which is why something like a classroom discussion or reading that Bruce book at the beginning of the year can be very important, because it helps a teacher and a peer understand their role and their ownership in the learning of this communication device user's AAC system. So, to conclude this presentation, I have added, and these should be in your slide, some very useful websites, or websites I find very useful. My personal website it just has tons of downloadable, free, all kinds of things. Science experiments, books, modified books, vocabulary, charts. You'll need to go to augmentative communication up on the left corner and then scroll all the way down to the bottom, the very, very bottom, and that's where you'll find the links to all the different resources. However, there are also some really good videos, and please stay tuned for the Bruce book as well, which will be posted on there as very, very soon. Practical AAC, lots of awesome blogs, information, resources. Teachers Pay Teachers, I do have a site, and there are a couple others if you search core vocabulary books that you can print those vocabulary books out and then add your own icon sequences to the bottom so you don't spend all your time sniffing Google images. AAC Language Lab has some free resources, but also it is a subscription, and with that you will get any PRC and LAMP pathways with the books that are available on there as well. Tarkeel Readers, a wonderful website where you can download books or use books from there and then add your own symbols using like Chat Editor. And then lessonpicks.com is where if you happen to have a subscription to this and you go to Treasure Hunt game and you want to modify your Cariboo game, you can do that as well. So yes, you can do this. There are lots of resources already created online. Like I said, go to my website, start using some of these examples today as a springboard to think about maybe one thing that you can do tomorrow to start teaching simplifying the task of modeling for those adults and peers that are working with and communicating with these AAC users all day long. So looks like we have time for about a minute and a half of questions, maybe 1 minute. Any questions? Well, thank you so much for attending today's presentation. I really hope it was something you'll be able to use, and if nothing else, inspired you to go out and try to use some new materials and resources. You can email me at any time if you have questions or ideas. I love ideas too, at gretchenstorm@gmail.com. And then again, my website's stormspeechtherapy.com. I've included the references to those 2 articles I cited on your handouts as well.
This was great, Gretchen. Thank you so much for all the information. I hope people will check out the resources that she's shared with you. I was able to see a few extras earlier when we did some practice, and I'm just amazed at everything that she's done. So someone asked where the presentation is. In the materials section, you'll see it's you won't get the PowerPoint. It's kind of a policy that many presenters, as well as Saltillo has, is that we don't really give out PowerPoints, but there is a handout with lots of great information on there. So you'll see it summarizes her presentation very well.
Yes, please download the handout. That should have everything that you need from this presentation. And then also, as far as Saltillo's other webinars, they have others that have been recorded, and they're excellent. I've watched them. One of them is how to model. One of them is on how to use Chat Editor. So if you do have time, do check the rest of those out.
And they're not recorded at this time. It is something that we are beginning to do, but we'll offer them. Right now we have ongoing webinars that are live for this semester, and then starting in January, we're going to do 1 live per semester and record them. So you'll have options there. So we wanted to make sure that information stayed available. Gretchen's recording today will be, this is recorded, and we will be putting it up on our website and up on our YouTube channel. So you can always go back and review some of the great materials that she shared. Okay, thank you so much for joining us, and it looks like we're at the top of the next hour, and so we will be ending this webinar here shortly. Have a great evening.
Bye everyone, thanks again.